Rookie cop swiftly fired after this stop. So I guess he did something wrong. Let's check it out. It's cold as fuck.
Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers identification requirements, loitering laws, and reasonable suspicion, and is brought to us by Royal Muscle Fountains. There's a genius. You could say ice for help. After about 20 or gas channel, who in Locust Grove, Georgia, and exited his vehicle to make a phone call. After about 20 or 30 minutes, Officer Pitts, Officer James, and Officer Mosley of the Locust Grove Police Department approached Mr. Hellcat and began to question him about his activities.
What's going on, man? Are you hanging out? Are you meeting somebody? Are you waiting on somebody? Are you lost?
I live out here.
So, the reason I'm asking, we've been here how long? Probably 20 minutes?
30 minutes.
30 minutes?
Yeah,
Hadn't got any gas. You hadn't gone in and got any food. You parked at a gas pump. And I know the tank's not on this side. It's on the other side, right?
No, I'll never take this stuff gas.
So, what are you doing?
I'm just chilling. I don't want to go home yet. I can't sit in the parking lot. Because I live out here.
Where you have some ID? Let me see your ID. Or is it in the car?
It's on me, but what's the problem?
Let me see your ID.
What?
I mean, you can make it super difficult, but you do
No,
have to
I'm just wondering why y'all. I've literally been on the phone just talking.
I know.
Go and get your ID, and then while you give us your ID, she can speak with you. But you need to identify yourself, so go and get your ID.
Officer Pitts asks Mr. Hellcat to provide his ID and implies that she wants to confirm that he actually does live in the neighborhood. Georgia does not have a stop and identify statute that requires individuals to identify themselves to police officers during Terry stops. However, under Georgia's loitering statute, which is found in section 16-11-36 of the Georgia Code, officers can request that individuals suspected of loitering identify themselves. The law states that, quote, a person commits the offense of loitering or prowling when he is in a place at a time or in a manner not usual for law-abiding individuals under circumstances that warrant a justifiable and reasonable alarm or immediate concern for the safety of persons or property in the vicinity. A law enforcement officer shall, prior to any arrest, afford the person an opportunity to dispel any alarm or immediate concern which would otherwise be warranted by requesting the person to identify himself and explain his presence and conduct. The statute also lists an individual's refusal to identify themselves as a factor that may be considered in determining whether alarm is warranted by the individual's behavior. However, it is unclear whether a court would agree that Mr. Hellcat's behavior warranted, quote, a justifiable and reasonable alarm or immediate concern for the safety of persons or property in the vicinity. In the 1995 case of Evans versus State, the Georgia Court of Appeals concluded that reasonable suspicion existed to stop a group of individuals for loitering after they slowly drove through a shopping center parking lot for 45 minutes without parking or entering a store, and slowed down even further to closely examine a type of car that is often stolen when a high number of automobile thefts and break-ins had occurred in the shopping center parking lots. But in the 1996 case of State versus Banks, the Court of Appeals held that standing on the side of the road for no apparent purpose in a known drug trafficking area was not sufficient to support a reasonable suspicion of loitering, despite officer testimony that this was a common method of conducting drug transactions. Here, the officers cite concerns that Mr. Hellcat may be engaged in drug trafficking based on his behavior and patterns of past drug sales in the parking lot, as well as their observation of a known drug offender approaching him and speaking to him. If a court agreed that this was sufficient to give the officers reasonable suspicion, they would be within their authority to request his identification and an explanation under the loitering statutes. But Mr. Hellcat would not be obligated to provide it. Of course, it's important to keep in mind that officers would also have the authority to take these actions without detaining Mr. Hellcat, regardless of whether reasonable suspicion existed.
So right now, what it falls under is loitering. So loitering, yes.
Yes.
Because like if you were like getting gas, waiting on somebody, like if you were doing anything other than just kind of like hanging out, it wouldn't be an issue.
Well, I've been on the phone.
We know.
This area is known for narcotic activity. It's known for criminal activity. So that's another reason why we're speaking to you. We want to make sure that's not afoot.
Right here, people will park. They'll go over there. They'll wait right here. They'll wait for somebody. They'll do it like that.
Under a
Bro,
street
you
light?
have no idea.
So
Well,
Yes.
I live out here.
I believe you do.
Shit.
You know, you have your ID with you.
Is the license or is the address on your license current? Is that
No.
your okay? What's your current address? The state's definition of loitering is doing something not like the norm. Hanging out at the gas pump, not like the norm. You know what I'm saying? So we have to just kind of get out. Now, if you like take off and run as soon as you see us over here,
Why would I do that?
well, so that's it. That would add to it, but you didn't, so it makes it look a lot better. You get what I'm saying?
Officer Pitts attempts to explain Georgia's loitering law to Mr. Hellcat, although she fails to include the requirement that the suspect's unusual behavior cause reasonable alarm or immediate concern for the safety of persons or property. Anti-loitering laws, which make it a crime for an individual to be in a public place for no apparent reason, have a long and controversial history in the U.S., and they generally have been found to be unconstitutional when they broadly prohibit all types of loitering. U.S. loitering laws were modeled after England's quote-unquote poor laws, which were created in the 1600s during an economic depression to address the issue of large quantities of unemployed workers roaming the streets. As briefly discussed in a previous episode of ATA, the first major challenge to the constitutionality of an anti-loitering law was decided by the Supreme Court in the 1972 case of Papa Cristo versus City of Jacksonville. In finding an anti-loitering statute that prohibited loitering and defined loiterers as, quote, persons wandering or strolling around from place to place without any lawful purpose or object, to be overly broad and, quote, void for vagueness, the court held that because there were no standards governing the exercise of
let's go
on a
back to the
property
case, man.
loiter that enforcement.
But I literally come here all the time. I live here. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, that's fine, but
That's
you can't
fine.
just if you're not doing any business, if you're not getting gas, you're not
But
going
I
to
was
get
actually
food.
finna go in there. I just had a phone conversation.
Well, that's cool, but now that we've had this communication, it's what they call dispelling the alarm. Now that we're able to figure out, okay, this guy doesn't have any issues or anything like that, then we can be by our merry way. But we never met you a day in our life. I've never met you.
I've never gotten
She's
out
never
with
met you. He's never met you. So we're just doing our jobs, what we're getting paid to do.
All right, Mr. Lawrence. Finish up your phone call. Go
Well,
inside,
I
do
mean,
your business if you got to, and then head on home. All right.
Yeah, but
Second
that's
thing,
kind of
your
that's crazy.
look. It's
Like I've never.
Go look up loitering in Georgia
No,
code section.
my father's a retired sheriff.
Okay.
I
Well,
know, but I never.
like I said, this area is known for drug transactions. We're gonna make sure none of that's occurring here tonight.
I
So
literally in the public eye, and I haven't spoken to them. And I know you saw the weird girl run up to my car, and I'm like,
yeah. They just came from a party
with
down
a bunch
in
of
their
with a bunch of
neighborhood. A whole ton of drugs, and we're sitting
Right,
right
but
there
see,
with
my-
our blue
my
lights
car-
on.
I do a lot of stuff in the community and shit, so my car is like really well known. I race at Silver Dollar, I do track dance, I don't do no drug activity.
And like you said earlier, the reason we got out with you and asked you and didn't just like immediately throw you in handcuffs is called dispelling the alarm. That's all that happened.
we sat there for a while. We observed you. We were watching. Okay, this guy's not getting gas. He's not going in there. We're watching everybody come and go. So it already drew our attention. Then we saw somebody that we dealt with earlier with a whole bunch of drugs around here coming up to you. I'm like, okay.
Right,
So
and they said, hey, I see your
Right.
car everywhere, because I live out here. They said, we see your car, SRT on the side.
Hey,
I
which,
said, thank you.
which makes sense. And that's the reason why we came over here to introduce ourselves, dispel the alarm, make sure there's nothing nefarious going on. Now we're going to be about our way. Because now, if we thought something nefarious was going on, then we'd be going a whole different direction. You understand? But we have to dispel alarm, make sure nothing nefarious is going on. You understand that?
Officer Pitts says that the only reason that Mr. Hellcat wasn't immediately thrown into handcuffs is that the officers wanted to give him the opportunity to, quote, dispel the alarm. This statement is another reference to the Georgia loitering statute, which states that, quote, unless flight by the person or other...
All right, hold on. Give me a second, man. This shit crazy. That shit crazy as fuck, boy.
Other circumstances make it impracticable. A law enforcement officer shall, prior to any
feel like
arrest,
something's
afford the
in my
person an
damn-
opportunity to dispel
I'm
any
good.
alarm or immediate concern which would otherwise be warranted by requesting the person to identify himself and explain his presence and conduct. However, this does not mean that Mr. Hellcat was under any legal obligation to dispel the alarm that the officers were claiming was present. As the
Right.
Georgia Supreme Court discussed in Bell v. State, the case in which it found the loitering statute to be constitutional, constitutional. The statute, quote, does not require a suspect to provide information, but rather guarantees him the opportunity to explain his conduct, thereby possibly dispelling the officer's concern for the safety of persons or property before any official action is allowed. The court also clarified that the statute did not allow an individual to be convicted of loitering whenever they fail to explain his conduct and presence to the satisfaction of the arresting officer, stating that, quote, the statute, in fact, safeguards against this situation. Section B provides in part, no person shall be convicted of an offense under this code section if it appears at trial that the explanation given by the person was true and would have dispelled the alarm or immediate concern. The explanation he provided for his conduct was reasonable enough that it should have dispelled the officer's alleged concern for the safety of persons or property in the vicinity.
I get it.
Have a good night, sir.
All right, have a good night. I don't have one on me. I'm Officer James. It's Officer Pitts. That's Officer Mosley. I mean, and I definitely encourage you to go look up the code section, OCGA loitering. Loitering. Look it up.
The officers eventually left without arresting Mr. Hellcat, allowing him to continue with his day. 3 days after this encounter, Officer Pitts was terminated from her position at the Locust Grove Police Department. It is unclear whether Mr. Hellcat filed a complaint or plans to pursue legal action. I reached out to the Locust Grove Police Chief Derek Austin, but he would not comment on the incident featured in this episode. This could be due to the fact that he's the third Locust Grove Police Chief that's been hired in the past 4 months, due to the previous 2 being fired and jailed for stealing money and evidence from the department, and he was not the chief at the time of this encounter.
Crazy.
Overall, the Locust Grove officers get a C-, because although there is an argument to
It's crazy.
be made that
Oh shit. Yeah, them boys with some fuck niggas. But we ending the stream, man. That was the end of that video, bro. I appreciate everybody that come through, man. I'm tired, bro. I'm not even really feeling good, so we out.